Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down 12 players that we are looking to absolutely never, ever, even if there's a fire, leave fantasy drafts without. Of course, though, I'm not going to sit here and give you 12 of my own players. That would be ridiculous. We got two of the best in the business joining me today. Fantasy Life's finest, Jake, the People's Champion, Trowbridge, and also the one, the only Cooterdoodle, who, guys, if you didn't know, Amanda, you once did get a hole-in-one.
You know, back in 2012, nobody's talking about it, Ian.
Nobody's talking about it. Jake, you have not gotten a hole-in-one, so catch up. Come on.
Well, or I just haven't bragged about getting a hole-in-one, and you'll never know. No, I have not, and I would not stop bragging if I did. I kind of also want a director's cut version of this show, Ian, with just your 12 that you're not going to leave your drafts without. Maybe we can do that later.
Article coming up on fantasylife.com. That article will be for free, but some of our tools and rankings are not. I invite you guys to use code Ian for 20% off Fantasy Life Plus if you want to do that. Great transition, Jake. That's why you make the big bucks in this business. So appreciate you guys tuning into the Fantasy Life Show as always. But of course, guys, let's get things started with our DraftKings opening lines. Again, everyone, 12 players that we cannot wait to draft this year. But first, we did have some pretty relevant fantasy news to talk about. First things first, Matthew Stafford. No, not Matthew Stafford. Keenan Allen joined the Los Angeles Chargers, everybody. 1 year, $8.52 million deal. We'll get to Stafford's pregnancy here in a few minutes. But man, with Keenan Allen did turn 33 in April. But back in the powder blue, guys, only have to go back to 2023 to find the last time he literally posted a top 3 fantasy finish. Cooterdoodle, you in on some Keenan Allen this year?
You know, I'm not, but I like the moves that they made here. Did you see what was posted by Schefter about like how they traded Keenan Allen away to Chicago, then they used that pick to move up and get Ladd McConkey, and now they have both. So it's kind of like a, you know, get your cake and eat it too situation. I like it.
I appreciate Keenan Allen holding out the entire summer, didn't actually have to deal with any of these OTA practices, stuff that a 33-year-old doesn't have time for. Said from the beginning he'd be down, go back to Chicago or go to one of the Los Angeles teams. Jake ends up with the Chargers, and just objectively speaking, man, this probably was his best landing spot from a fantasy perspective. I've moved him up to just the wide receiver 61 right now, which I know sounds bad, but like he does actually fit the archetype of the wide receiver you should be looking for at that late in drafts. Again, we'll see if he even does manage to get the starting job, but I would think with $8.52 million going to him, probably will be seeing him out there in 3 wide receiver sets.
Yeah, he should be featured at least a little bit. You know, I'm imagining week 1, they're just going to really make a show of it with Keenan Allen, the big homecoming. We'll probably see like a 10 to 12 target game out of him just for old time's sake. before it, goes back to a norm of like 3 to 4 targets per game. It does bum me out just a little bit for Ladd McConkey. Both these guys obviously do a lot of dirty work in the slot. So I'd probably be just a little bit lower on Ladd than if Keenan had just done what I'd asked and signed with the 49ers. By the way, we wouldn't have to talk about this, but still hope for everybody in the Chargers offense.
If you do want to move Ladd down a couple overall spots, I guess that's fine. I kept him steady, though, at wide receiver 11. I think the real loser here, if there is one, is going to be Quentin Johnston. Personally, Trey Harris is going to be more of that field stretcher, that deep ball type that I do think should continue to hold on to that starting spot. We'll see how things play out, but wouldn't completely overreact with Ladd. Again, we saw him just, perform so incredibly yards per route run, both in the slot and out wide. Was just the wide receiver 5 guys during the second half of the season into the playoffs overall. So Ladd McConkey, not too concerned. Quentin Johnston, though, maybe the clock has struck midnight on that fairy tale comeback story. All right, guys, the big news, though, is Matthew Stafford. And we have actually finally gotten some words on the back injury that obviously we've been talking about here for weeks now. Per Ian Rappaport, thank you, Rapshi, for giving us this intel. He is dealing with an aggravated disc in his back and has received an epidural to deal with it. Amanda, epidurals, that's what they give women to deal with pregnancy. I don't love 37-year-old quarterbacks needing an epidural before the season. Is that a fair concern to have?
It is, but here's the thing. He's had lingering back issues for a while and he's played through them and he's been fine. I will say though, anecdotally, after my epidural, I never threw another touchdown. Well, I didn't before either, but still that's got to mean something, right? But Puka, if I'm looking here at these tier 2 wide receivers, I know Fantasy Life has him at the tippy top of tier 2 right now as wide receiver 4. He's around Nico Collins and Malik Neighbors. Maybe I'm leaning more Collins and Neighbors now with that news until we see him healthy on the field.
That's kind of where I'm at with the rankings. I'm not going to make these huge adjustments, but in terms of a tiebreaker against fellow alphas for both Puka and Devontae Adams, I think it's fair to have some concern. Now, Jake, I will say, this is an offense led by Sean McVay with Puka, with Devontae Adams. Do we need to pretend like the Rams are going to turn to the Saints if we have Jimmy Garoppolo under center? All right, sorry, Cooterdoodle resident Saints fan, not trying to throw too many strays at you here. But look, I understand, guys, we don't want Jimmy G under center. That's not helping the Rams Super Bowl contention. But I don't know, Jake, I feel like this offense with a healthy Stafford is legit top 10, maybe even top 5 in the league. With Jimmy G, 15th, 16th, something around there. I can't believe I'm sitting here trying to give some respect to Jimmy G. I don't want to be a Jimmy G stan. That does not sound cool to me. But Jake, the dude is number 1 in the Super Bowl era in yards per attempt. Even if that was helped out a lot by the 49ers, by Kyle Shanahan and all that, it kind of seems like he's in another one of these systems that could bring out something close to that.
McVay, an astute student of the Shanahan style offense. So I would say the only thing that gives me hesitation, I was so in on the possibility of Puka and Devontae finishing as top 12 wide receivers in fantasy this season with Stafford under center. I got to admit, guys, I think I kind of jinxed this one a little bit. I wrote about Stafford's back problems recently. I was so cavalier, making jokes about how he's always had back injuries and who in their 30s hasn't had some sore back issues. But now with the reality of a potential QB swap, at least for maybe a game or two, it does make me back off of Devontae as a top 12 guy, just a scotch, just a smidge, but I'm still going to be drafting both.
Again, we'll be going through kind of that wide receiver 2 tier later. Everyone kind of has one problem or another once you start getting past the A.J. Browns and Ladd McConkeys of the world. So not going to nosedive Devontae, but man, some of those running backs, even the elite QBs and tight ends in round 3 and round 4 guys looking that much more enticing. But did want to shout out a poll I went over and put out on Twitter today. We're going to show you guys, shout out YouTube and TV viewers right now. I appreciate you guys. But I just want to see, around the league, if you did have a dirt average quarterback, you wanted to get the best possible performance out of them, what offensive environment would you pick? I included the Vikings, the Eagles, and the Rams. And man, I thought the Eagles would by far away be the number 1 place you want to put a quarterback in, particularly given all the Jalen Hurts slander we kind of had over the last few months. But they're neck and neck with the Vikings. The Rams all the way down there at 15%. I'm not sure people realize KOC, Kevin O'Connell, obviously a great coach, kind of learned a lot of those tricks from Sean McVay himself during their time together in Washington and then even in Los Angeles. So Vikings, Eagles, Rams. Personally, I would have the order Eagles, Rams, then Vikings, I think. Cooter, are you in agreement, though, that these are 3 of the better offenses? Is there maybe one I'm forgetting?
Oh, wait. Where's the Saints on this list? No, I think you nailed it. But I don't see why people aren't hesitant. I do like the Kyron Williams the money he's making now, though, because at least you've shored up that side of things in the event that the Garoppolo's out there slinging the ball.
Jake, maybe you could have Shanahan himself or the Buccaneers on this. But again, we are literally talking about, even if you want to add a couple more, like top 6, worst case here, this is a good offensive environment with a backup quarterback who has to be on the short list for the best backups in the league, at least.
Best backup, sure. I mean, I don't think it's an extremely high bar. No offense. No offense to all the actual real world NFL players that are backing folks up. But outside of, like in terms of consistency, at least, look at like maybe Tyrod Taylor and you go, okay, if the worst happens, we should still be okay with Garrett Wilson, with Tyrod Taylor. And I do think that Jimmy G at least fits that category of things where it's not red alert. We don't have, I'm not even going to say a name, but we don't have some of these much worse backups entering in and completely cratering things.
Jimmy G now living that tweet where it's like accidentally became important at my job and now my whole life is falling apart. Hopefully, though, we can at least keep our fantasy teams with Puka and Devontae from falling apart. With all that said, everyone, Rapshi did say the Rams remain confident Stafford's going to be ready for week 1. We all here at Fantasy Life do hope that is going to be the case. So appreciate you guys. This has been the DraftKings Opening Lines. Listen up, baseball fans. Another epic night of baseball is on deck. Time to swing for the fences with my partners at DraftKings Pick 6. Right now, brand new customers who play just $5 on their first pick set will get $50 in bonus picks. Here's how to join in on all the action. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app. You sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE, choose 2 or more MLB studs, and call more or less on stat lines like will they hit a home run, get 2 or more hits, or strike out 7+ batters. Lock them in, sweat every at-bat, and then battle for your share of huge cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app today. Register with my code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. 12 players that we must have in our fantasy drafts. You can call them my guys, whatever you want. Again, just guys that regardless of position, ADP, what have you, we are trying to go out of our way to land. Kicking things off with a pair of quarterbacks. Cooter, we're going to start with you first. Someone who has led the NFL in passing touchdowns over the past 2 years. Also interceptions, but whatever. We don't lose that many fantasy points to them anyway. Talk about Baker Mayfield and why he is one of your ride or dies ahead of 2025.
Look, here's the thing. Everybody's talking about Baker and his regression potential in 2025. And I was going to say, I hope they quit, but I don't, because I would rather see his ADP drop just a little bit. I think he's perfectly placed here at QB8. But when you look at him around like Mahomes, Murray, I want Baker. I want the guy that I can wait a few rounds. He's going like 7th, 8th. I don't have to take a quarterback early like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. However, even if he regresses, if we look back, I know he had issues with the Browns, he had issues with the Panthers, the Rams, but now that he's found his sweet spot on the Bucs, he's been going over 4,000 yards. And then like we saw last year, 41 touchdowns, tied QB2. So here's my thing. When you think about the Bucs, and look, as a Saints fan, I hate to think about it, but when you think about the Bucs, you have weapons literally everywhere, where they've even added, which we were kind of surprised at first, with Emeka Egbuka, but it makes sense. He has all these weapons, even Cade Otton, who's going to catch probably 4 touchdowns this year. So regress, he might, but what is that? 3,800 yards, 30 touchdowns. I'll still take it round 7, round 8. And yeah, I mean, you really can't convince me out of it, especially Bucky Irving there too. I'm sorry, guys. He's my guy. He's my quarterback.
Especially if he ends up keeping up this rushing upside he started showing off last year. I mean, it does seem like maybe his floor is even higher than given credit for. So I know I didn't include the Bucs in that 3-team poll from before, but if I left out kind of the coaching element of it, I think Tampa Bay absolutely would have been up there. Of course, Baker on his 8th offensive coordinator in 8 years. That sucks and everything. But Cooter, the one wild card here, as we learned in the last few days, no more smelling salts allowed in NFL games. I mean, Baker came out and said, now you just got to bring your own juice to the party. I'm going to be severely affected, to be honest with you. I mean, Cooter, no smelling salts. That's concerning here.
You know, is it though? Maybe that's why he fumbled the ball 9 times last season. You know, maybe he was just kind of like out of it or too into it. And you just said he had the most interceptions. So I'm not worried about it. It's Baker. He'll be fine. At least in this offense, he'll be fine. And like I said, regression wise, I kind of hope that conversation continues just so he can drop a little bit. But I'm never the girl that will draft a quarterback super early. So if I'm waiting until that, sweet 7th, 8th round, why not go for Baker, who could have QB3 upside?
Yeah, QB4 last season. Don't see why he couldn't even improve on that by one spot. Jake, you got to be a smelling salt guy, right?
How did you know? I just exude smelling salt energy through this screen, apparently. I will say I did write up some quarterbacks who I thought had 35 plus touchdown potential. And Baker is a name that still resides up there, in terms of guys who are not dual threats by the traditional sense, but does have some scoot to him, as you mentioned, Ian. I think that we look at the transition away from Liam Cohen and we get a little nervous. But let's also remember that he was replaced by last year's passing game coordinator. So it's not as if this is going to be a fully new regime coming in there. And I will just say, if he gets that 35 touchdowns, he's pretty much a lock for top 12 quarterback fantasy finishes. Only one person in the last decade who's hit 35 hasn't done that. That was Eli Manning in 2015. Shame on you, Eli. Outlying piece of datum. But it's looking up, I still think, for Baker at a discount.
Good stuff on Baker. Jake, the quarterback that you do not want to leave drafts without, though, is a bit more of a dual threat maven out here. In fact, he had more rushing yards on scrambles than Lamar freaking Jackson last season. Talk about Drake Maye, someone who really does seem to be your favorite fantasy analyst's favorite late round quarterback this year.
That's right. I can't get enough of Drake Maye. You want to wait at quarterback? I'll wait even longer at quarterback. How about that, Cooter? I've got Drake Maye locked in, mostly because last year he was expected to make chicken salad out of, frankly, chicken hootie boo. And he did. He did exactly that. He had one of the worst wide receiving units in all of the NFL. In fact, they ranked only above the Carolina Panthers in terms of separation. And this stat really kind of rocked my world when I read it. Going into last season, the entire Patriots wide receiving unit had averaged 34 receptions per season in their combined careers. That's how inexperienced these guys were. You look at Stephon Diggs, the new guy coming over to the Patriots, he's averaged 90 per season going into last year. But Ian, one of my favorites is a stat that you had posted shortly after the season. We're talking about that dual threat upside that Drake Maye has. On his 10 starts, he averaged 220 passing yards and 35 rushing yards per game. That puts him in rarefied air. That is prime Cam Newton, Michael Vick, Josh Allen territory. So all he needs is some reliable person to catch the ball from. And I think the improvement in the coaching staff is going to help him make up for any other shortcomings there.
I was going to bring up the list if you weren't going to, Jake. Again, it just keeps on going on and on, man. Mike Vick, Dante Culpepper, Randall Cunningham, Kyler, Russell Wilson, RG3, Donovan McNabb, and Steve Young. Can add Drake Maye and then also Jaden Daniels to that if you, again, just kind of remove some of those games where they were injured or barely played these snaps in the first place. So with Drake Maye, again, look at this list, guys. That is freaking baller. Like, Cooter, it is a one-game sample. And I remember, back in like 2018, I was actually talking to Matthew Friedman before he ended up joining up with us here at Fantasy Life. And I was infatuated with Chris Herndon, okay? Which, yes, it went wrong. But I had this stat, and it was like, rookie tight ends to average 9+ yards per target. And it was all these awesome names in Chris Herndon. And Friedman was like, Ian, that's a cool stat. But if we're sitting back here in 3 years and we say, hey, which one of these guys was the obvious bust? It was probably going to be Chris Herndon. Freaking Friedman was right as usual. Do you get that impression at all here with Drake Maye? Amanda, or are you drinking the Kool-Aid as well?
I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, especially where he's going right now. Like tier 3 guys like Kyler Murray and Justin Fields and Caleb Williams, you've got these question marks around them all. And I don't know if you guys saw right before this show started about an hour or two ago that they at practice today, there was like another fight and the coaches jumped in. And so now the players like Hunter Henry are saying like, he's right there with us. And so there's this cohesion where everybody's fired up. And I feel like that only happens when you have all cylinders firing at the same time. So the team believes in him, the coaches do. So I'll drink the Kool-Aid. I'll be honest, about a month or two ago, I wasn't, but I'm coming around.
Mike Vrabel apparently came out of that fight with a bloody face, which is just the most football guy thing ever. He's okay, everyone, don't worry. But Patriots camp heating up there in that cross scrimmage there with the Washington Commanders. So good stuff, guys. Now, before we get going into running backs, yeah, it's time. Running backs ADP audit presented by Premier National Sports. Time for some running backs that we just cannot wait to leave our fantasy drafts without. And I'm going to kick things off now with Vikings RB 1, 2, 1A, 1B. We'll see what happens, guys. But Jordan Mason is going to be eating into Aaron Jones' workload in a far bigger manner than what we saw guys like Ty Chandler or Cam Akers do last season. So Mason was actually pretty freaking awesome while CMC was sidelined last year. Only Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry have more rushing yards during the first 8 weeks of last season. Those were also the only two running backs that were better than Mason in terms of next-gen stats, rushing yards over expected per carry. So I believe in the guy. And also just you look at a picture of him standing next to Aaron Jones, looks like the sort of guy that we want to give the rock to him. I understand we can look at the A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones pictures from past years and see how that line of thinking doesn't always hold up. But really, guys, it just ends up being the price point because we're used to playing a lot of this underdog best ball. And, Dwayne and I are in those real-time sports streets where it is higher stakes. It's a bunch of sickos who are grinding this stuff day in and day out. So when I see Jordan Mason as the RB 30 at an underdog, that makes sense to me. I actually have him a little bit higher in my own personal ranks. Again, fantasylife.com, code Ian, check it out. But over more to some of the home league sites that maybe are taking a little bit longer to adjust. RB 40 on ESPN. He's next to Rashad White and Zach Charbonnet, behind Tajay Spears. Over on Sleeper, RB 39, again, behind guys like Zach Charbonnet, who just have no chance, in my opinion, to have the same sort of standalone value as Jordan Mason. I mean, Cooter, again, I always talk flex with benefits. You want these running backs who, of course, have the high handcuff upside, but when they're also being priced next to pure handcuffs, yet they could actually go ahead and get 12 to 15 touches per game, score a touchdown or two. I mean, that's the stuff that zero RB dreams are made of out here. So, Cooter, you with me? Jordan Mason?
Oh, I'm with you. And look, even our very own Kendall just wrote about how like those first 8 weeks last season with CMC out, Mason led the NFL with 51 missed tackles. We have now JJ McCarthy. And so maybe they're beefing up the run game. They'll have to rely on it a little more depending on, which clips and stories you're hearing from Minnesota. But the way I look at it is kind of what you just said, Ian, is you look at which site you're drafting on. I mean, I know on Fantasy Life, we have Jones and Mason pretty much ranked near each other, RB26, RB30. But depending on where you're drafting and what sites, that gap between the two just grows. And so you can really get him at a discount. And it's a beautiful thing to see.
Jake, resident Packers fan, are you just going to bed at night just completely shaking in fear of having to face Jordan Mason twice this year?
I thought you were going to ask if I was still sad about us letting go of Aaron Jones. And yes, but answer yes to both questions, frankly. I'm terrified of Jordan Mason. I do think it's interesting. I would say this is probably more of a format-dependent question for me. If we're in full PPR formats, there's still going to be a heavy preference for me to grab Aaron Jones just because I do think what they want him to do is more of the pass catching work. They don't want him to be the brutalizer that they tried to make him out to be last season. It's just not going to work for him, especially at his advanced age. So Jordan Mason, I think, though, remains, regardless of format, one of the best handcuffs that you can get. And as you mentioned, in a pinch, toss him into your flex spot and he can still do some nasty business. I think he'll probably be the one getting most of the touchdown upside as well.
Well, so I wanted to bring that up, guys. Oh, well, just that short yardage usage. I mean, Jeff Ulrich was talking about how he could be maybe the 2022 Jamal Williams of this team if he gets those, 1, 3, 2-yard touchdowns in there. So I like the upside.
We see these running backs pop up. There's Jamal Williams. There's Raheem Mostert in 2023, Damon Harris and LeGarrette Blount on some of those Patriots teams. I mean, these are the types of backs we should be targeting. It's why when Jake and I were doing our favorite draft pick in every round, even though it sounded weird to say out loud to all you listeners out there, yes, I do think Brian Robinson is someone we should be looking at in these later rounds. And honestly, I think Mason's more talented than Brian Robinson. I think the offensive upside is pretty similar. And don't look now, guys, but the Vikings might have finally fixed this offensive line. ETR's Brandon Thorne actually has them as their 5th ranked group going ahead of 2025. So Jordan Mason, someone that, again, I'm trying to leave every single draft with. Cooterdoodle, you actually want to leave with the RB5 on the Broncos, according to their unofficial depth chart right now. Talk about RJ Harvey and what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, look, an hour or two ago, it came out that he's 5th string, you know what I mean, on the depth chart. That doesn't worry me one bit. Bo Nix was 3rd last season on the first depth chart. But what I'm excited about is you look at the history of Sean Payton, and everybody's been talking about, I know Ryan Heath was where I saw it first, about how Sean Payton has only drafted 4 running backs before day 3 as a head coach. Only 4. And if they were all in the Saints, so, I'm going to talk about it a little bit here, but you talk about guys like in their rookie season, Reggie Bush with 155 carries, almost 600 yards, 6 touchdowns, but then also 119 targets for 742 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rookie season, Reggie Bush. Then you look at Alvin Kamara. Same thing, rookie season, about 120 carries, over 700 yards, 8 touchdowns, but then also 100 targets, over 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. So the way that he's using these running backs that he's picking and he's drafting and he believes in, I really think RJ Harvey could be in some good company here. We already saw what happened when Peyton went kind of and reached for Bo Nix last year at 112. He outperformed a lot of those rookie quarterbacks. He's really been up there. And so I believe in the guys that Sean Payton believes in. And so I'm high on RJ Harvey. I hope that this depth chart thing sprinkles around just for another week or two around my home league so I can really capitalize on it. But I was kind of thinking, y'all tell me how you feel. But Ian, do we think RJ Harvey could have like a 2024 David Montgomery on the ground, Jahmyr Gibbs in the air outcome? You know what I mean? Am I getting too high, getting too above myself here?
No, I think him and Dobbins certainly fit that mold. We've only seen actually 2 backfields enable multiple top 12 running backs in the same season in like the last 12 years or something like that. Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara with Sean Payton were one of them. And then also we had Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. Montgomery and Gibbs have gotten very close. Demon's been like RB15 or so. So I think you're onto something. I don't think you need to, just be drafting Harvey and then like refraining from Dobbins or vice versa. Take them both, guys, because Sean Payton knows how to enable these fantasy-friendly running backs. He's done it nearly every single step of the way. So I'm going to show you guys a chart right now. And it is just the overall finish in PPR points per game from Sean Payton's running backs. I mean, we're talking top 18 and 14 of his 15 seasons leading the Saints. Yeah, Javonte Williams wasn't great these last 2 years, but man, even an RB3 floor isn't exactly the worst case scenario that we've seen around the NFL. So Jake, look, I'm not trying to sit here and say RJ Harvey is prime Alvin Kamara or anything, or Reggie Bush even, but man, it sure seems like Sean Payton likes the guy. And if we've learned anything, it's that we should probably be paying attention to who Sean Payton likes.
He loves him. And I was one of the skeptics, frankly, of his drafting Bo Nix so high last year. And I ate every single word that I said about it. So that's not going to happen to me this year. Not going to catch me criticizing RJ Harvey. And I will say, maybe that RB5 spot on the depth chart, you guys, is reserved specifically for the Joker. Did you ever think about that? Sean Payton's come out. He's obsessed with finding his new Joker. Some of those guys that he's worked with that you mentioned, Cooter, in the past, part of the reason they were so valuable for fantasy football is because of their overall utility. And I'll just throw in RJ Harvey back in freshman year of college was technically a quarterback. It didn't work out for him, but that's how he went into college. So he has that skill set in his bag. And we know Payton loves a running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback hybrid. So I think RJ Harvey's going to see plenty of playing time regardless.
So Evan Ingram, his Joker, tired. Sorry, I was going to say Evan Ingram, his like running back, tight end, tired, and then RJ Harvey wired.
Exactly. We've got a Jared Leto versus Heath Ledger situation here, guys. That's all I'm trying to say.
To say Javonte Williams maybe retired by the end of things. We'll see what happens in Dallas here. But in that chart, we did have Alvin Kamara jumping up all over the place. Obviously, this dude has been a fantasy gold mine for the better part of his entire career. Even these last few years, despite the fact that the Saints offense hasn't exactly been a great viewing experience, as Cooter can tell you all about. With all that said, though, Jake, Alvin Kamara is someone that you still do want to be coming away with in drafts this year.
I do. And, Cooter, I know that you're trying to stay away from your Saints. You want to keep, home versus work kind of separate there a little bit. But I'm going to invest in a couple of Saints, but mostly Alvin Kamara. He's the guy I want. Just last season, this dude was the RB6 in points per game in half PPR. I know he's 30 years old. I know that scares people. It's not that it doesn't scare me a little bit. But we've got Kellen Moore over there who's going to be forced into using him, if only because, there's not a lot of options here, right? We've got Chris Olave, who's already, got some concussion issues that hopefully don't pop up again, but it is something you have to note. And then it's Rashid Shaheed, and that's it. So at 30 years old, am I expecting, a career year? Am I expecting 2,000 rushing yards like Saquon got with Kellen Moore and the Eagles last season? Of course not. But I do think that 100 targets for Alvin Kamara for the fourth time in his career this season is super on the table. So any running back who's going to get close to 100 targets is somebody that I want on my team. And I got to say, I'm a little disheartened. I went over to the Fantasy Life rankings and I had to click onto a second page to see Alvin Kamara sitting there at our consensus RB17. Who do I write to about this to get this fixed?
Man, it's one of those things. I always say, guys, nothing good ever happens when you have to click next on the next 50 waiver wire pages. So the fact that, again, is next 15, the rankings, not ideal either. It's funny, though, Cooter, I was actually at a mock draft go up on fantasylife.com, and I talked about one of the guys Jake mentioned was Shid Shaheed. I think we also mentioned him on our perfect draft podcast from a little bit ago. But, I said, what would Cooterdoodle do here? And you actually said, no, you do not like drafting Saints players. You like to keep church and state separate in the Cooterdoodle household. Is that something you actively try to do in fantasy drafts?
Yes, because I am in the dome on those home games rooting for them, and I can't also, if we lose in fantasy because of it. So I keep it separate. But look, Kamara, I do agree, is a great zero running back strategy guy. I mean, he's going so late, like you said, consistent. He's going to see targets. He's going to see those little quick dump offs. We don't even know who the quarterback's going to be at this point. So if I'm going zero RB, I don't hate going with him as my first guy off the board. I don't hate it. But however, I won't be doing it.
Fair enough. And I mean, again, just purely from what Jake was saying, like a running back with 100 target upside who just finished as a top 5 back in the last 2 years, if that's all you knew about anyone, let alone Alvin freaking Kamara, I think you'd be feeling pretty good about that option. Now, from one of the best fantasy running backs in really recent memory to a guy who hopefully will have a role this year, Jalen Wright, a running back that I am trying to leave every single draft with, everybody. Now, you're going to see him outside top 50 on more sites than not at the position. Overall, we're talking like outside the top 10 rounds. I mean, we are talking a true late round dart here. And honestly, I don't get it. First things first, he changed his number from 25 to 5. That's an alpha move. That's fantastic 5. That's exactly what we want to see out of a player going into year 2. But also, it's just the reality that, hey, Raheem Mostert is gone. We also have a reality where Jeff Wilson is gone. Yes, Alexander Madison is getting training camp hype. So is Tyquan Thornton. So is every freaking player in the NFL right now. So excuse me for not believing that Alexander Madison, of all people, is going to be a problem. But let's say he is. Let's say Ian's wrong, all right? And we have Ollie Gordon or Alexander Madison eating into this short yardage work. I still think that going outside the top 50 RBs, just the fact that we are looking at Devon Achane's handcuff alone makes Wright more than worthy of that price. So that's kind of where I've been coming from with Jalen Wright, my most drafted player overall of this entire offseason. And Jake, it is a little bit scary to be going out on such a limb with a player that we really have no idea yet how good he can be at the NFL level. But again, I just feel like talking about the flex with benefits player, like the archetype that we have here for Jalen Wright, it's why I have him ranked inside my top 40 backs. And the fact we can get him outside the top 50 on Yahoo, Sleeper, ESPN, CBS alike, sign me up 8 days of the week, man.
Yeah, the limb you're going out on, it's pretty sturdy. The fact that he's going so late in drafts, it's not as if it's going to crater your team if for some reason he doesn't pan out the way that you want him to. But I should also mention, hey, the Dolphins traded up to get him in the previous year's draft. They traded into the 3rd round to make sure that they got Jalen Wright. And I also think it's a situation we'll know pretty early, game 1, game 2, what his share is going to be of that backfield alongside Achane. So if you're looking to use him as a flex early on, you'll get your bearings. And even if he's not that guy, yes, I think he is a predominant handcuff that you should be trying to get on your team.
Cooter, is it kind of a coward move by me to name a player going this late? Because then if it doesn't work out, I can be like, oh, it was a late round pick. What do you expect?
No, I mean, you are hitting all the points that matter when you're drafting, right? And when the things that you said, Alexander Madison had, I don't know, his yards per carry were 3.2 last season. I know it was a different team, but then Ollie Gordon, you mentioned, he wasn't drafted until round 6. And last season, 71 touches for Jalen Wright, even splitting time with Mostert and Wilson. So I think when you're looking at those backups, that's the kind of mix that you want. Down here, we call it like a good gumbo. You got all the little pieces, you toss it in the pot, and that's the guy that you want on your team. Late round, has a great chance of really doing his own thing. And we hope Achane doesn't have any injuries, but he's had some history there too. So, also, did y'all see Tyreek Hill wants Jalen Wright to get put in on 3rd down? Did y'all see that?
What a wild thing to go out there and actually say in front of a press room with a microphone. But honestly, the fact it was Tyreek, maybe not the most surprising thing in the world. But long story short, if Alexander Madison is the reason why I'm wrong on Jalen Wright, then I don't even want to be right. All right, guys, this has been the ADP Audit presented by Premier National Sports. Love our guys over at Premier National Sports, and we continue to invite all of you at home. If you know a high school athlete, if you are a high school athlete, friends, family, neighbors, any of that stuff, let them know about Premier National Sports, guys, because this is a wild time to be alive, trying to take your game to that next level. We got the NIL. You can get paid, and that's fantastic. But yeah, you can get paid. So treat this seriously. That's what the fine folks at Premier National Sports are here to help you with. We are talking personalized recruiting strategies and NIL education, all the resources that rising high school athletes need to succeed at the next level, both in terms of financially and, of course, on and off the field. So check them out if you haven't yet. You can get in touch with their team at premiernationalsports.com. Quarter three here on the Fantasy Live Show. We're breaking down 12 players that we must have in our fantasy football drafts here as we get into the thick of fantasy season. As always, though, check out all of our content over at fantasylife.com, your one-stop shop for all things fantasy success. Guys, wide receivers that we cannot wait to draft this upcoming August here. Cooter, starting off with someone who, I cannot go a single day without hearing great things about him in training camp. And yes, he is going to be going early in drafts, but there is this range after the first 5 or 6 picks where we have a lot of players kind of in a similar tier. You seem to want to go out of your way for one Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, and look, I'm doing the opposite of you, Ian. I'm not going for these guys real late. This is a round 1 guy, and I'm sorry, there are 2 sides of the coin. You look at Russell Wilson, you look at the New York Giants, and you can say, man, Malik's a good player on a bad team. But even last season, the New York Giants scored 31st in the league in total points scored, 273. And they were ranked 30th for total yards. And Malik Neighbors still managed to be 5th in receptions, 7th in receiving yards, and 2nd most targets across the entire league. So you look at it from the perspective of, it can't get much worse. You have this guy who came in rookie season and absolutely dominated with almost no help at all. And the thing I find the most fun is the team was ranked 30th in total yards, yet he was 7th in wide receivers for yards. So he was doing all the work. And then you can look at things like, I think there was only 5 wide receivers that had more targets than Brock Bowers. Only one of them a rookie, Malik Neighbors. So yeah, this guy's going to get the ball. He's going to catch the ball and he's going to do things with it. And what if we see a Jameis Winston game thrown in there? Maybe an 89-yard touchdown like Jerry Jeudy. Who knows?
My God, the way the AI is working these days, can we just figure out how to clone Jameis Winston and start a fantasy league or just a real life football league with him as all 32 teams quarterbacks? That is a simulation I want to live in. Jake, if we knew Malik Neighbors was going to have above average quarterback play, which is on the table, okay? Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, maybe even first rounder Jackson Dart could be a complete dude out there. Neighbors would be right up there with the Jamar Chases and Justin Jeffersons, the fellow LSU ballers of the world. That's how good he was as a rookie.
Yeah, I think there's only 2 guys where I look at this year right now and say I have to draft these 2 receivers over Malik Neighbors. And for me, that's Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. I think there's even a conversation to be said that it's a little more of a coin flip between Justin Jefferson and Malik Neighbors than maybe people are willing to see on the surface there. The thing that maybe would cause me to pause a little bit is actually not Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston. It is Jackson Dart. As much as I like him, coming in, there might be a little bit of turbulence. You might see a couple of down games as he sort of gets used to the offense. But over the grand scheme of things, we can adjust that if we need to, if it even comes to that. But I did see, this was posted to fantasylife.com, so I know it's legit. Wide receivers to reach 17 fantasy points per game as a rookie since 2000 in the millennium. It's OBJ, Jamar Chase, Anquan Bolden, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, and Michael Thomas. So that's pretty stellar company.
I will say too, Cooter, Neighbors got a chip on her shoulder this year, okay? I had my home draft a couple weeks ago. Neighbors was my keeper, all right? Put him up there, round 4, feeling good, putting my confidence in him. Draft went through. I didn't like my running back room. Had several, maybe a few too many Mike's Hard Lemonades during it. I traded Malik Neighbors for Ashton Genty an hour after my draft. That could be bad voodoo, Amanda. That's probably breaking some sort of fantasy, football law right there.
But it's one of those things where, like Jake said, he could have some down weeks, but it's like when you love a player and you love watching a player, you forgive him. It's not his fault. He's going to do the best he can given what he had. And he had almost nothing last year and did great. So I cannot wait to draft him this year.
Week 14, Amanda just, hugging virtual Malik Neighbors, Robin Williams style. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, Malik. Jake, I think it was Jalen Waddle's fault that he did not put up better numbers last year. Okay, I know that we had Tua Tagovailoa out of the picture, but can you at least outscore Alec freaking Pierce and Romeo Doubs? With all due respect to Alec Pierce and Romeo Doubs. I mean, Jake, really? We're doing the Jalen Waddle thing again? We're saying he's young and he had this great start to his career. That's enough for you?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. You said it all. I don't even need to talk about this guy anymore, Ian. No, but I look at Jalen Waddle, and yeah, you used up some of my excuses for him, so thanks for that. But I will say, let's go back to the start of his career. Yeah, last year stunk. There's no getting around it. It absolutely stunk. And I was in on Waddle last year, but I'm not going to be one of these guys who got burned and just says goodbye forever. Because Waddle has been a top 24 wide receiver in 3 of his 4 years in the NFL. Before the fall off. And I got to say, it's not a coincidence, I don't think, that happened when Jonnu Smith came to town and saw 111 targets and really started eating into the type of targets that Jalen Waddle was getting before him. But luckily for us, Jonnu Smith is out, replaced by Darren Waller. Let's just say he's not the same type of threat, Darren Waller, that he was way back in 2020. So I'm not all that worried. And we already mentioned Tyreek Hill. It seems like every day there's something that Tyreek's saying that brings about more turmoil and maybe more question marks about his commitment to this offense. So I wouldn't be shocked if Waddle became sort of more of the trusted asset on and off the field for Tua. But, Dwayne McFarland wrote about Waddle as a potential late breakout candidate here in his 5th year. It always makes me feel good to agree with Dwayne. So I'm just going to point out that he suggested just maybe there's a Devontae Adams or T. Higgins-esque breakout on the horizon for him. But even if that doesn't happen, I think we're looking at a solid top 24 guy that you're getting at below flex prices.
Cooter, there's a lot of really good receivers going in that range. Travis Hunter, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley's getting up there. Jalen Waddle stick out to you, though, as someone that you want?
Yeah, he does. And you know what? I am so easily swayed by just a good narrative. And I know that doesn't match with numbers, but I was on the Perfectville podcast talking Dolphins with Sam Marceau the other day. And we were talking about Tyreek Hill and all these things in the last week or two where he's talked about their wide receiver coach, Robert Prince, and kind of thrown shots at him. And then he threw shots at Devin Achane. And then he said he didn't even understand the offense these last 3 seasons. And apparently at training camp, Tua's looking Waddle's way a little bit more often than he had been in the past. And Tua even came out and had said the other day how the things that Tyreek has been saying over the offseason about leaving, that he needs to work on himself, that he needs to really help build this relationship. So could there be, a little breakup brewing? I don't know. I like this Waddle call. I do, Jake.
I mean, Tyreek literally changed his profile picture after last season to Antonio Brown with his shirt off, leaving the field against the Jets. I mean, if that's not kind of tweeting into existence what could potentially go wrong here, I don't know what is. Jake, I'll also say this, man. Look, you as 2 fellow white males, I'm a horrible dancer. I'm assuming that you're probably in my boat as well. It's hard for me to get up there and gritty and not look like a complete idiot, okay? I appreciate the Waddle, okay? It's a goofy, it's an easy dance. Fantasy football is supposed to be fun. We can get behind this, Jake.
Yeah, this is really my secret reason for adding him onto this list is so that when he does score touchdowns, and hopefully there will be many, we can both get on a podcast and just look like real cool dudes doing the Jalen Waddle move.
Just a couple of cool, chill guys hanging out over here on the Fantasy Live show. I'm going to go ahead and nominate just someone who, again, late round dart, if you will. Just kidding. Texans wide receiver Nico Collins, right up there with Malik Neighbors in the first round. The opposite, the antithesis of Jalen Wright, if you will. So, look, with Nico Collins, again, I really do think, guys, that he has a chance to be the overall wide receiver 1 in fantasy football this year. I just think he's on the same talent level as the Jamar Chases, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lambs of the world. If you want to say they're a little bit better, that's fine. But again, the great Matt Harmon, some of the better wide receiver minds in our lovely industry here, they do agree that we are talking about a legit top 5 receiver in Nico Collins, number 1 in yards per route run over the course of these past 2 seasons. And where's the target competition? Christian Kirk, some Iowa State rookies, Dalton freaking Schultz, give me a break. I just think Nico Collins, guys, has a quarterback that, yes, wasn't fantastic last year, but I will take C.J. Stroud over old man Matthew Stafford, over guys like Russell Wilson and company when we are getting down to it, even maybe over J.J. McCarthy at this point. We'll see what happens. Sorry, Thor, if you are listening to this, but man, still just someone that, again, don't think he's had his biggest season yet. And when we start looking at some of the potential problems going on with the running backs, with the wide receivers 5+, I just think Nico Collins at the end of round 1 makes a ton of sense. So I've gotten some questions already about just like where's kind of your preferred draft spot. And I don't hate the idea of going top 6 because, yeah, you can lock down one of the big 3 wide receivers or running backs. They all do deserve to go ahead of Nico Collins. I get it. But Jake, man, the more I look at this, I do think there starts to become some questions after you get past, players 16, 17 or so, being at the turn and being able to get a Nico Collins or Cooters, Malik Neighbors along with one of those running backs. I don't hate that start at all.
It's not a bad place to be. If you can lock down Nico Collins and follow that up, maybe even with a Devin Achane, I think you're loving life at the start of your draft there. I like your call out about the backfield too, Ian, because I don't know what's happening with Joe Mixon's foot. I don't know if the Texans can really say what's happening with his foot. I know that Nick Chubb's been running in quicksand. I don't think that's changed from the clips that we've seen coming out of training camp and even some of the overall chatter. So I like Woody Marks more than the next guy. But at a certain point, you just have to admit they're probably going to be throwing a lot more than they were last year if the injuries really do continue.
Offensive line is a problem. Pretty much everyone has them ranked as a dead last worst group in the league, which it just must be a slaughter at practice, man, because Will Anderson and that pass rush are lethal. So I'm just can't even imagine what that looks like out there. So Cooter, I think that would be the one hole that I've going here. But man, Neighbors versus Nico Collins, again, I think both these guys are dudes that they should absolutely be firing up in round 1, God forbid round 2.
Yeah, but see, I need guys like you, Ian, in my league because, whenever you're just sweating it out and you're like, God, I hope this guy falls to me. You're in that first round. I hope Malik Neighbors. If you were right before me, I wouldn't have to worry because you would just take Collins. I'd get Neighbors. We'd both be happy.
Shots fired, Cooter. Fair enough. We'll see what happens. Nico versus Neighbors this year. We're not going to forget that one. This is probably going to age very badly. We'll see what happens. Cooter, we are going back to you, though. Sliding down a little bit more here in the ranks. Mr. T. Higgins, fresh off that wide receiver 5 finish in PPR points per game last year. Yeah, Jamar Chase is there, but T. Higgins, pretty freaking great in his own right.
He is. And this is my riskiest of these ones that we've picked today because, look, I know Higgins had he averaged the 8th fewest yards after catch last season of guys with 75 targets at least. So that's a little risky, but he does do some damage whenever he has some space. He does have injuries. That's a little risky, right? But in only playing 12 games last year, guys, only 12, he still managed to almost break 1,000 yards. And of guys under 1,000 yards or less, he had the highest amount of touchdowns. And it was a career high. I get that. But it's hard for me to look away whenever, if I don't have the 101, let's say theoretically, because why would I get in 12th place in my league, right? So I don't have the 101. I still want a piece of this Bengals offense because they are throwing the ball so much. They were ranked 6th in points per game. I want a piece of it. I'm not going to get it through Chase. So I want some Higgins.
It is one of these funny things, Jake, where guys like T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, they have these big touchdown years. And I almost feel like some of the, more analytical people in our community, that Dwayne McFarland's and Matthew Friedman's of the world, I feel like they'd be lining up to draft these guys more if they just had a worse season before. Isn't this a weird phenomenon, Jake? We're penalizing players for scoring too many touchdowns the previous year.
Too many touchdowns, a phrase that I say often. I say, you can't do that. That's too many touchdowns, guys. Let's back it off a little bit. No, I do think, touchdown regression. I understand it. Touchdowns aren't a sticky stat year over year. But when you look at the type of offense that the Bengals are, it feels like it could be stickier for him than most other wide receivers that maybe have had major changes in offensive scheme or coaching or quarterbacks. None of that's the case with T. Higgins and the Bengals. We've got the same group back together. The defense, if they can stay a little less injury bitten compared to last year, maybe they'll be better, at least on paper. And they won't have to throw the ball 650 plus times, but that Joe Burrow is going to be chucking it plenty. And T. Higgins, almost by default, seems, I don't want to say locked in because that's jinxing it, but seems close to locked into double-digit scores.
Amanda, all Drake and joshing aside throughout this episode, I do think you nailed the wide receiver 2 who we should actually be going after. I'm going to pull up a chart right now here for our lovely viewers. And, sometimes I'm a bit of a dickhead on Twitter. That's just something I like to do in my spare time. So, take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. But seriously, when you start looking at right now the consensus wide receiver 12 to about the wide receiver 24, there is a pretty bright red flag for all these guys. With Tyreek, we're wondering if he's old and washed. With Marvin Harrison, he couldn't outscore Quentin Johnson last year. Garrett Wilson's quarterback can't complete a pass in practice. Devontae Adams' quarterback could be pregnant. Again, all these guys have one thing going wrong or the other. With T. Higgins, though, only thing I come up with was like his hamstring probably hurts already, which is a main thing. I hope that his hamstring is okay, obviously. But really, guys, like out of this group of guys, and yeah, he's near the top to begin with. I know they're not all equally priced, but yeah, Amanda, like give me T. Higgins here, and then compared to some of these other guys, I think I'll just kind of bypass the wide receiver position more drafts than not.
And I was reading on fantasylife.com, this guy, Ian Hartitz, said that Higgins has wide receiver 1 ceiling. So I don't know what you think, but I trust him.
What could go wrong with a guy with that weird of a last name? So T. Higgins, we'll see if he can again get that 2024 magic going. Got that nice contract, kind of a one-year deal. Cincinnati just always known for treating their players right. We'll see what happens in this fantasy-friendly offense. Going to end things here, though, with my guy, Keon Coleman, someone who, again, I've been barking about pretty much all offseason long, so don't need to go too deep into it. End of the day, guys, he's going outside the top 50 wide receivers. Josh Allen's probable premier red zone target, probable deep threat wide receiver, maybe even the lead target earner with Khalil Shakur dealing with that high ankle sprain. Josh Palmer's been a little bit banged up as well. I mean, Keon Coleman, okay, he came in as a raw prospect. He's still only 22 years old. Can we stop writing guys off after one not even horrible season, but just one season where he didn't live up to what Ladd McConkey and these other guys were doing? Like Keon Coleman, just watch the highlights. This is not someone we should be rooting for.
No, you're right. I mean, the fear that I have is, the Bills are going to be like a top 3, top 4 offense again. They're going to be slinging the ball, but they don't have that it factor at wide receiver, at least as far as target share. So he just needs to step up. He needs to be that red zone guy. And if I'm going to target one of these wide receivers for the Bills, why not go for the one that's, going to have an ADP difference of at least a round and a half? So I get it. I don't mind it. Wide receiver 50, I think, is where he's ranked right now at Fantasy Life, and he could easily outperform that.
8 targets and a touchdown in week 1. Look, maybe he has 0 targets and 0 freaking catches in week 1, Jake. But he'd be on the cover of every single waiver wire article in the industry if we get that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little disappointed and shocked, frankly, that we're not talking about Curtis Samuel here, Ian. But if we're going to talk about Keon Coleman, we can talk about Keon Coleman. No, I really do think, especially with the Shakur injury, there's going to be a deficit. Josh Allen cannot do it all himself. He's going to have to find a next man up sort of thing with the pass catchers. I also like Dalton Kincaid for that reason. And I would also say that's another guy that we've probably written off too soon, Ian. I remember back in the day, we used to be properly waiting for guys to break out and not make the assumption that would happen in year 1. Coleman's got all of the athletic profile that you could possibly ask for, just needs some fine tuning. So hopefully he gets that this offseason.
This generation, guys, just not waiting for fantasy football breakouts the way they used to. Not us here on the Fantasy Life Show. Again, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle, Nico Collins, T. Higgins, and Keon Coleman. 5 wide receivers we are actively trying to leave every single draft with. More tight ends, I should say 8 tight end that we cannot wait to draft this year. First, though, a quick word from our friends over at Renegade Fantasy. Fantasy football players, aren't you done watching your season crumble because of injuries or underperforming players? Well, welcome to Renegade Fantasy Football, the only app that lets you substitute players in real time. No more losing Sundays, no more lost points, no more could have won if complaints to the group me. With Renegade, you're not just a GM, you are the coach. Call the shots, make the moves, win your league, step out of the luxury box and onto the field. This is fantasy football without limits. This is Renegade Fantasy. You can join the Fantasy Life League today at fantasylife.renegadefantasy.com. Jake, we went around our chat before the show. We each submitted 4 players. You were the only one brave enough to actually talk about a tight end, and I love it. Round 4, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk's hurt, Deebo Samuel's gone. In this economy, sign me up, man. Sell us on George Kittle.
I mean, we've talked so much about George Kittle, so I got to find a different angle here to convince people. I don't want to convince too many people because I don't want his ADP to go up too much more, but I want to convince the right people to be drafting George Kittle. And when he finishes as the tight end 1 in points per game last season, in standard, in half PPR, in full PPR, that's all the formats, you guys. And then he's still not going as the tight end 1 or tight end 2 in fantasy drafts this year. I understand it. I also like Brock Bowers. I also like Trey McBride. But for my money, I am calling for a George Kittle tight end 1 finish again in 2025. You have to go all the way back to 2017 to find a season where he finished outside the top 5 tight ends in points per game. And guess what? 2017 was his rookie season. Last season, Kittle saw 21% of targets, 21% of air yards for the 49ers. And now you look around the depth chart. I don't know who's going to be suited up and healthy in week 1. Do you? Does Shanahan? Does anybody here even have a guess? Will Brandon Ayuk be out there, and when? Will Ricky Pearsall's hamstring injury flare back up? I hope not. Certainly, I like Ricky a lot as well. Dwan Jennings, there's the hold-in and his own injury. CMC coming back from a litany of injuries. George Kittle, it feels weird to say, he's kind of the only guy I really, truly trust in fantasy football from the 49ers, outside of Brock Purdy, honestly.
Look, any player can get hurt, so we'll kind of leave that potential variable out there. But Cooter, like the only 2 potential red flags I see with I see with George Kittle. 1, the smelling salt thing, as we talked about with Baker. George Kittle also very against that policy. But 2, it's like every fantasy analyst is really high on the guy, at least the ones that I respect out here. I'm high on him too. I just feel like the fantasy gods don't want good things to happen. I mean, do you see any holes here, Cooter?
No, I mean, it really comes down to this. It's very simple. If you don't get Brock Bowers and you don't get Trey McBride, you got to go George Kittle, unless you're going to literally wait to the very end of your draft. That's the 3. That's like the little trifecta. And so I could be happy with either one of those 3, but Kittle's going the latest, so why not try? The only problem there is, man, if you miss him, if you miss Jake and someone gets him before you, you're going to have to wait a bit before you draft tight end.
It is a situation, quarterback, tight end alike, kind of taking that Ricky Bobby first or last mindset this year. Like that shout out, Cooter. I'm waiting if you do happen to unfortunately get sniped on Mr. Kittle. That's going to do it for us, though, today here on the Fantasy Life Show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, like and subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Otherwise, just have a great rest of your day. So for Jake, for Cooter, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everybody.